The Quickening of Light and Shadow on today's Oblyron Spirituality. Greetings everyone, I am Oblyron, Lord of the Underworld and consort to the most lovely Hecate. Thank you for joining me on today's episode where we are going to talk about the quickenings of light and shadow and how they differ between normal light work and normal shadow work, and the consequences that arise because of them. Now, if you resonate with today's message, then feel free to let us all know by liking and subscribing or leaving a comment and sharing your story. So a quickening is a little bit different than normal light work or normal shadow work. A quickening is when we get to the point to where we have already been doing the work and everything that we've done kind of coagulates and turns into something which is greater than the sum of their parts. Many of us start off first with a quickening of light. It is because when we get into spirituality, we have a tendency to, let's say, start off with chakra openings and meditations like that. And so as we begin to practice these meditations for a while, as we begin to, read the books and watch the videos and learn from other people's experiences, there comes a point where all of that work begins to turn into something else. It turns into, depending on what your experience is, it could be something very visual. It could take you into realms which you never thought of before, or you never conceived of that idea before. Sometimes it takes us into realms where you don't even see anyone who's written or said anything about it, and that's when we know that we've really embraced that quickening, so to speak. So that's a quickening. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's never been discovered before. It just has to be something which seems like it's taken on a life of its own. And again, for the quickening of light, it's far more benevolent. It's when it's when we start to encounter probably our guides. It's probably when we begin to discover that we may be star seeds, or we may be from different parts of the universe. It can also be we discover our past lives. But for the most part, it will generally be a very informative and a very sort of uplifting experience, generally speaking. For me, my quickening of light was put into the videos, 7 chakras, 7 sins, and 7 planes of existence. That was the universe sort of coming to me and really explaining, I guess you could say, its inner workings to me in a way that I could understand. Also in that quickening of light was when I learned how demons can possess the chakras and various other things. It was also the time when I met a lot of guides. I was both approached by the Raw Council and I had briefly encountered several other guides throughout the whole process. So it's a very active time. It's a very fertile time of creation, of seeing all these different wonders within the scope of the universe. It was also when I sort of expanded outward to discover, we belong to the body of God. It's like being able to zoom out and to keep on zooming out, and what lies beyond the visible light that we can capture with our telescopes. So yeah, for many of us, it is very typical. It is very, or I should say, it's typical to sort of feel at one with everything. It's typical to realize how we are all interconnected, and it's probably one of the first times in our lives when we go through a quickening of light where we really begin to experience that, we are part of a greater whole as well. So after several years of experiencing life through a quickening of light, we may get to the point to where now all of a sudden either we begin to apply those lessons in our practical everyday experience, or maybe we find that what we have learned and what we have come to view as sacred, maybe it doesn't quite have the same weight that it once did. This could be a time when we start to feel a little bit more disconnected from the light experience that we once treasured so much. And even physiologically, we may feel the sort of joy begin to drain out. We may begin to feel a little bit empty, and many times in that situation, we kind of ask ourselves, okay, well, did I do something wrong? And we may feel the need to even, let's say, reach out and explore more extreme forms of spirituality to be able to compensate for that lack of, let's say, internal stimulus that we once got with the quickening of light. And this is all very, very much a natural part of the process as well. However, what I've realized in going through that is that I began to descend into the quickening of shadow. And I would say from the quickening of light to the quickening of shadow, for my particular experience, it was about a 10-year timeline. So, we got about, I had a quickening of light back in 2011, and of course it kind of shot me into the stratosphere. So for a good several years, I was kind of riding on cloud nine, having all these revelations come to me and whatnot. And so after about 5 years of that, it kind of peaked and it started to go down. And it was when I began to descend into the quickening of shadow that a lot of these shadow aspects of my practice had started to reveal themselves. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but looking back in retrospect, they were there. And that was when I began to see, these things pop up about me. These things pop up about the spiritual experience, maybe some of the cynicism, some of the, mentality of, is any of this even real? And I found that even though, as I tried to sort of meditate my way back into the higher vibrations, nothing worked. And this also coincided in a period of life where it felt like I had to do more in the mundane world too. See, when we go through these spiritual experiences, it takes time. It takes time to meditate. And if anyone has really gone off of a really big meditative binge or something like that, that you can easily spend hours or even days in these types of states, and it feels like 5 minutes have gone by. So it takes time. It takes time to do these things. It takes time to be able to practice those spiritual abilities. And of course, in the time that we're practicing, there's only so many hours in the day. If you are spending your time doing one thing, you're not spending your time doing another. And so as I began to descend into the quickening of shadow, I realized, okay, well, I need to pay more attention to the ground beneath my feet. And I would say a lot of people also go through that. It's like we have these initial spiritual experiences, but then, reality calls us back. We realize, maybe we need to make more money. Maybe we need to find a better, more fulfilling career or job, or build a business or something. And I think a lot of that is also fueled by the quickening of light, because you experience this joy and this elation, and you kind of want to feel that all the time. And you want to feel that in your work. You want to feel that in your relationships. And so by experiencing that pure bliss, it causes us to be a bit more discerning with what's really going on around us when that bliss sort of, I wouldn't say disappears, but when we come off of that initial high of that light quickening. So at that point in my life, that was a point when I opened up a business, when I started an LLC, and I realized that, again, a lot of these shadow aspects are starting to come out. And also I realized, as I began to focus more on the mundane world, I also had the ability to be able to justify my actions, because I was manifesting. I was manifesting my future. I was manifesting my destiny or whatnot. And so that in turn also brought out more shadow work. It brought out my ruthlessness. It brought out my anger. It brought out so many of these things which I had kept buried and repressed for so long. And so after a couple of years of going through that and really experiencing these sort of dark revelations about myself, that was also when I went through a shadow quickening. Because remember, a quickening is not like doing shadow work on a daily basis. We can all do shadow work on a daily basis. We can all do light work on a daily basis. That's not really a quickening. The quickening is when it all begins to become greater than the sum of its parts. And that was during the time when Hecate came into my life, and that was also during the time when I started to really realize my underworld associations. So just as a quickening of light kind of propelled me off into space, and I was encountering all these different guides and all these different beings of light, the shadow quickening had the exact same effect, but on the shadow side, it taught me many of the things which I had repressed and buried, because we view these types of actions as not being socially acceptable, or we may feel ashamed or guilty for wanting to behave in these manners or whatnot. And again, just as like those little bits of information were slowly coming out and being revealed to me over time, it eventually got to a point to where everything began to take on its own life. It began to take on new forms, and I began to see many more things about the dark side of me that I never even realized was even there. So this is one of those things I can't really say these are the steps that will get you from one point to another, or this is when you're in a shadow quickening, or this is when you're in a light quickening. For me, it was very personal. I think it's based off of what we've studied and how we approach life. Again, a quickening is a very personal experience, and we're all individuals. We all have our own ways of going about doing things. So, one person's quickening of light could be completely different than how mine was. One person's shadow quickening could be completely different than how mine was. And, this isn't really one of those videos where you could say, here are 7 steps to get to your light quickening or 7 steps to get to your shadow quickening. I don't think it really works that way. This is something which takes place over time. Like I said, between the quickening of light and shadow, mine was about 10 years apart. Now, does that mean that, I'll be experiencing another quickening of light, 10 years from my shadow quickening? It's possible. I don't know. If we go in terms of Jungian psychology, we have a tendency to spiral our entire lives. So whatever revelations that we learn in our 20s come back with greater amplitude in our 30s, greater amplitude in our 40s, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's very possible that we oscillate between these quickenings of light and shadow. It's very possible. If any of you have been on the journey longer than I have, and you can attest to this, feel free to leave a comment. It would be great to hear some different perspectives. But from my perspective, yeah, the quickening of light happened in my early 30s, and the quickening of shadow happened in my early 40s. So again, if you've resonated with today's message, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, or a comment and tell us your story about how you've resonated with it. Also, I have a Discord server where I perform weekly guided meditations on Saturdays, and I also post a lot of information on that server that I don't necessarily cover in these videos. So again, thank you for joining us today, and love and light and wisdom and shadow. And now we shall close with the chant of Oblyron. Amde sote, amde Oblyron. Amde sote, amde Oblyron.